Hello and welcome to people on Facebook Live to my live edition of Due South by Southeast. We're the show which usually brings you Due South one episode at a time and gives Due South its dues. This week we're doing something a little bit different, a little bit special. We're joined by the man for whom which we would not be sat here today, the man who created the show almost 30 years ago now, and to this day we've still got people talking about it, still meeting in Canada at conventions for it. As well as creating this wonderful show, which we all love. He created Walker, Texas Ranger. He's a back-to-back Oscar winner, and he's written for James Bond. And as I found out through my research for this show, he's also had to start writing for animation. So we've got a few things to get through today. So please welcome to the show, Mr. Paul Haggis. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm very well. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So what was it which first interested you in getting into media? Like, was there something growing up where you just had the bug for it? Did you know this is what you want to do always?
It's a good question. It's hard to always spot where things start. But as best as I can remember, it was around 5th grade. And I was at St. George's, a public school. And I was being taught by nuns. And that was challenging at times. But this one particular nun, I've forgotten her name now. It's a shame. But we were, we all had to write compositions, and I was never a particularly good kid. And I was not that great at school. But I'd written a composition, just a 2-page essay of some sort, and she was handing them back. And she came by the rows, handing them all back when they'd been graded, and mine said A, and she leaned down and whispered and said, "You're good at that." And for some reason, that really sparked. It really sat with me for a while. And I'd always loved writing. Well, I used to write comic strips. I created these little strips of cowboys from when I was very, very young. And I created these 2 characters. One was the hero. His name was Sam, oh Sam. I think because the heroine was always going, "Sam, oh Sam." And we knew he was the hero because he had a curly hat, just a round face. And then there was the villain, Black Bart. And you knew he was the villain because he had a straight hat. And so I do little comics at him. And that stuck with me. So when I was getting into my teenage years, I'd been fooling around writing. I loved comic books. I loved Mad Magazine and things like this. And so thought I might try to write a little bit. And as I got a little older, I started writing some plays, some very, very bad ones. And my dad at that time had opened a small theater company because my sister, Kathy, wanted to be an actress. She was younger. And so he had this idea. He was in construction. He had a small construction company. I worked with him in the summer times. And we saw this burnt out shell of a Baptist church in London, Ontario. And he thought, I should buy that. We should turn that into a theater. And so we did, he and I and some of his workmen, and we renovated this old burned out church and turned it into a 100-seat theater. And that's when I started writing plays and putting them on. And as I said, really, really bad ones. And I wrote some with my friends, I wrote some with myself, I directed some, and and that's how it started. From there, I decided at some point to be a fashion photographer because I'd seen Blow Up, and so I went off to England to become a fashion photographer, and that failed. I failed spectacularly there. And, only lasted about 6 months before I came back with my tail between my legs, and so got more writing, working with my dad in the summertime, writing plays. And one day we were driving down the street, and he said to me, "Construction, you're no damn good at it, are you?" And I said, no, I'm not. I was at 22 at the time. And he said, "You should go to Hollywood. You should follow your dream. I'll give you, $100 a week, which was my salary at the time, for a year, and see if you can make it." And I said, "Great." I ran home. I was living with my girlfriend at the time. I told her we were getting married. We're moving to Los Angeles. I'm going to be a writer-director. And she said, "What?" So anyway, she went along. We packed up. We moved to LA and knew nobody. had no education. I hadn't gone to college. Went to 1 year of art school and 1 year of community college. That was it. And so I just started and took whatever little courses I could find here and there, and worked as a furniture mover all day long, and or various other odd jobs, and then would come home and write. So I'd work for 8-10 hours, and then come home and write every night, and wrote and wrote and wrote until I finally sold something.
Can I just ask you something there? Because like something which fascinates me about when you're talking about those early comic books you wrote with Black Bart, and he had the straight hat, and that's what identifies him as the baddie, and you get who the good guy is. I think there is a theme with your work of being able to understand archetypes very well. Yes. Were there influences which went into that? What influenced you to kind
I mean that stuck with me because, very soon in writing, as I became, I was a very bad writer for a long time. I earned a very good living as a bad writer for many years, and in television, and because I got into sitcoms, and Norman Lear found me and put me on every one of his bad shows he had. Not bad. I was on like Different Strokes, Facts of Life, One Day at a Time. Yeah. Good shows. But all my friends were on Taxi and Barney Miller and all these great, really. And I was writing What You Talking About, Willis. But after a while, I just started to understand that people just weren't who we thought they were. That it was often the one who looked like the villain who turned out to be the hero, and the one who looked so heroic who turned out to be the villain. And I came up with this theory early on that if you were in a movie theater and suddenly a fire broke out and there was smoke filling the room, you'd look around and go, okay, that guy right there, that's the guy who's going to save us all. That great big burly looking guy who looks so heroic. No, he's the one who's going to run for the door first, trampling all the women and children to get out. And it's the pregnant woman at the front. It's the tiny little pregnant who's going to organize everyone, who's going to get you out. And so early on, I started to, in my writing, say that it's never who you think it's going to be. Everyone's always a surprise, and that did stick with me. And that's when I was creating Due South. That was one of the things I wanted to stick with. Is you can never know, who the good guy is and who the bad guy is.
But I think you've got to understand those archetypes to write like that. That's what I think is very interesting.
Yeah, but you have the archetypes, and then you turn them on their head.
Exactly. Like they're very much early on in Due South. I noticed you were kind of setting up who every character is before you could like break the molds a bit. It's
yes.
Kind of, I think there's a theme there. So getting to some of the animation work you worked on. So I've got a little list here in front of me. So you did the Richie Rich Scooby-Doo crossover as well as them on their own. Heathcliff, Fonz and the Happy Day Gang, which must have been so much fun. And you wrote for the Plastic Man comedy adventure show, which also makes you in part of the DC TV world, I would say.
I think there's only one episode of that. I was very lucky. I was trying to break in as a writer, and I met this fellow, Michael Moore, and he was not that Michael Moore, a different one, a lovely guy, and his grandfather was Mo Howard of the Three Stooges, and his brother was very successful in animation. He'd written tons. He was one of the top animation writers, and Michael was struggling to get in and sell it. And I'd met him, and and he said, "Do you want to write something together?" I said, "Sure, sure." So we wrote some ideas up on spec for this new show called Dingbat and the Creeps, which Ruby Spears, which was part of Hanna-Barbera, were producing, and they said sure, and they liked the ideas, and so they assigned us the scripts, and the pay was very little, but it was a hell of a lot better than what I got as a furniture mover. And so we wrote the first season of that, and we wrote, whenever we'd be freelancing and writing all these other shows, and at some point, my daughter, I had a daughter by that time, Alyssa, and I was in my mid-20s, I guess, and I realized that after about 2 years of this, that I was starting to become quite successful at it. And I looked around and saw the other writers who'd been very successful, and they were all miserable. And I said, I have to get out of this. I have to somehow find out how to write for actual, live human beings. And so I quit and took a shot at trying to write for sitcoms. And mostly I was doing comedy at the time. And I was able to get, we pitched to, I think, Love Boat. We pitched to a lot of different places and got turned down. Everyone turned us down. And to pitch in those days, what you have to do is you hear about a show that's opening up, and they sometimes get you in to watch the pilot, and they screen it for 20, 30, 50 writers. And then you're invited to come in to pitch. And so between the time you watch the pilot and a week later, when you've got your appointment, if you're lucky enough to get an appointment with the producers, you'd come up with half a dozen fully fleshed out ideas for stories and another half a dozen areas. And we'd do that, and we'd pitch and sell nothing. But I think finally we got a shot at a Love Boat, and we wrote, they liked one of our ideas, and we wrote. So in those days, the Love Boat series, there were 4 different stories in each episode, and then writers wrote individual stories, and then the story editors or producers put them all together into a script. And so we wrote one storyline for one episode, and I sold it, and then did Three's Company, to script for Three's Company, and a bunch of other things, shows like Mr. Merlin, which never went anywhere. But yeah, it was a great life.
Because I find almost like elements. So I'm getting a little bit. I just
something's happening. You're breaking up. I'm going to turn my volume down a bit here, but see if that helps at all. Is that better?
Is that any better?
It is better. Yes, thank you.
Have you got any headphones? Very bad.
I have headphones someplace around here. Just a second. Let me see if I can go find them. I'll be back.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone who's joining us. Okay, I can see your comments. Who's commenting on my screen? So it's working now. Hope everyone's having a good evening.
Well, they're not in my bedroom. Usually take them out walking, so perhaps they're in my jacket. A second here. Ah, yes, I found them.
So quickly,
but I don't think that's it, though, because you're breaking up quite badly. Your voice is digitizing, so we may just have a bad connection. I'm not sure, but I will try these. Okay, I'm going to go to, how do I connect these things now? Bluetooth. I'm very bad at this.
Okay. How we doing now?
What's the Bluetooth thing look like? There it is. There it is. AirPods Pro. I'm connecting them. Connect.
Yes. That's much better. Yeah. People were telling me on the chat that they could hear you fine, but I think it was because my voice was bouncing back.
Oh, okay.
Okay, great. So, Paul, sorry to interrupt the chat there, but I find it quite interesting because it seems like these elements from the different types of shows you've done seem to have gone into Due South in one way or another, because you've got like that kind of larger-than-life cartoon element, you've got the comedy elements, and then there's kind of a series of sort of crime and law dramas that you've done. So you've got LA Law, Michael Key's LA Streets. Do you think there is a kind of theme in there?
You know, I loved crime stories. I loved adventure stories. I loved any kind of, I just love storytelling. And so, and when I was young, I loved horror films, the old Vincent Price movies that I'd go to the theater on Saturday to watch when I was, 12 years old, the Theater of Blood and all these things. And my parents would drop me off on a Saturday morning and I'd watch a doubleheader. So I just love storytelling. And, but also I'm sort of perverse human being. I love taking genres and turning them and flipping them and surprising you and pretending it's one thing when it's actually another. And that stuck with me in all my work. I like to set the audience up and say, okay, this is what we're doing. You can trust me. This is exactly where we're going with the story, and you won't be. Oh, yes, you are being surprised. Oh, sorry. Okay, yes, this is the character. Oh, yeah, and he's this, and you thought he was a good guy. He's the bad guy. And you thought it was a drama. It's a comedy, or you thought it was a comedy. It's a drama, and that's always stuck with me. I like turning and flipping and surprising the audience.
Okay, great. And the latter of the ones which I mentioned there, EZ Streets or EZ Streets.
Easy Streets. Yeah.
Easy Streets. I kind of totally ruined the pun there, but yeah. So that was an American-Canadian blend as well, I believe.
Easy Streets, which I'm very proud of, was immediately after the first season of Due South. I turned the show over to Kathy and Jeff, and I came back to direct a couple and write a couple, but I turned it over to them. And I'd been fascinated by by corruption in America and Detroit and Chicago, and I did a lot of research into crime and corruption. And so I created a fictional city, this border town, which was kind of like Detroit, Windsor, and I set my story there. So yeah, I guess it was. I like border towns. I like where cultures collide. And certainly that was the case with Due South. I mean, when I was doing Due South, I said, "Oh, I could start a border war here. I could the War of 1812. I could whip that back up again pretty darn easily." So,
well, after all these years, you've given away the master plan now.
Yes.
Speaking about Due South, so it started off as just a pilot. It was just meant to, or it wasn't meant to be a pilot. It was meant to be a TV movie. Is that correct?
No. They wanted a series. But you do a pilot in order to prove that. But when I was writing it, it just turned into a 2-hour pilot. So I thought, and they weren't particularly pleased about that. But I thought the story was pretty big, and so it deserved to be a 2-hour pilot, which is very unusual for them. But they were very supportive. CBS was, and that was Les Moonves back in the day, and then Robert Lantos at Alliance. It was actually his original idea. Roberts, he'd gone to no, it was Jeff Zagansky, I think. I can't quite recall who it was at CBS, but he had been trying to sell a Canadian television show for a long time and to the States and failing. And I was working in the States, and I was probably one of the few sort of successful Canadian television writers. There were some good film writers and directors, but in television they hadn't really broken in as much back then. And so I'd written quite a few television shows for America, and they came to me and said, "Listen, we've got this idea about a trapper or some northern guy, a Mountie, something, who comes to big city USA." And I thought, why me? This is the stupidest idea I've ever heard. This is just ridiculous. And so rather than just turning it down, I went away and thought about it for a day, and then I came back, and it was Jeff, and I said, "Okay, I think I can do something with this. I can subvert expectations. I can do a show about stereotypes, because I love stereotypes. Always have. I love presenting stereotypes because that's the way we all think. We pretend we don't, but we all think this way. And so I love presenting them and then thwarting them, and then say, okay, this, and then reinforcing them, and then thwarting them again, and then reinforcing them, because there's truth in stereotypes. There's a lot of truth in it, but at the same time, they're complete lies. So I love those contradictions. So I said, okay, I could have fun doing that. And so I went away, and I chose the Mountie and sort of this wheeler dealer, semi-corrupt cop, and in the States, and set out to make them partners.
I do love. There's something about it that comes from you have to know a stereotype and a place inside and out to kind of like to really play that stereotype and really take the mickey out of it completely, and then completely tell the reality.
And that's what it was. I mean, and being a Canadian and an American, I could see where both were completely full of shit. I remember my Canadian friends, when they knew I was living in America, I remember in Toronto, and we were talking about how jingoistic Americans were and how falsely patriotic and their flag wavers and stuff. And just like you, there were Canadian flags everywhere. So, everywhere. I was standing on the street with must have been 12 Canadian flags, and they're talking about how the Americans are flag wavers and they love patriots and they love their country. I'm going, did you notice? And so, but they can't. We can't see it. And of course, Americans. I love Americans and their view of the world because they just don't think the rest of the world exists. They just think there's America, and it's just like if you're in America, there's New York and there's LA, and then there's kind of something in between we're not quite sure of. There's a lot of grassland or mountains and things, but that's basically all there is. And as for Canada, they just think it's it's that cold state up north of Michigan someplace, and where there's polar bears and such. And I loved to play on that. And poor Michael, I remember teasing Michael way back when we got our first assignment in Canada, because before we were doing cartoons, this producer in Canada who was doing a sitcom for the CBC heard that there was a Canadian writer in Hollywood, and so I was a Hollywood writer, even though I'd never actually written or sold anything for prime time. And so they sought me out and they said, would you come and pitch some ideas to us? We'll fly you up. And I said, well, I have this writing partner who's American. They said, great, bring him along. So that was scheduled. This is coming up, I think, I don't know, November or something. And so we're scheduled to go up there in a few weeks. And so Michael, who was born or lived in sort of Washington State, which is as close to the Canadian border as you can get, and actually geographically north of London or Toronto, he said, so what's Canada like? I went, oh. And I, as I said, I'm a horrible man. So I said, well, it's Toronto, so it's a big city, but it gets cold. It definitely gets cold. I mean, in the winter, the streets, they ice over about 3 to 4 feet thick, and and so you can't go outside much, and so we have this underground, and you always use shops and things down there, which you do in Toronto, and so you survive that way because you don't want to go up onto the streets because with the street shut down, so the animals come into the city, the bears, the polar bears, the wolves, the wolverines, they sort of run the city at that point, and so it's really not safe to be outside. He goes, oh, really? And so I started telling him these stories over this period of time, and I mix in things like, the fact when you go out in the morning, your nose hairs freeze. Completely true. If any Canadian knows this, you just take a shower, your nose hairs freeze, and you go up. It's that cold. And then so this is going for weeks, and he said, well, what do you do for fun? What do you do for? I said, well, for fun, weekends, I like to go seal clubbing. And he goes, what? I said, yeah, seal clubbing on the St. Lawrence. It's on the ice floes and things. He said, damn you, I'm not doing any seal clubbing. I said, you know what? Fuck you and your arrogant American attitude. Those clubs are heavy, and those baby seals are small and squirmy. It's not as easy as you think. So, take your attitude and just keep it to yourself. So this goes on until Michael tells me he can't go. He's too scared. It's too weird. He can't go. And I said, Michael, I've been lying to you these last 3 weeks. He goes, no. He goes, yeah, I made it all up. He said, I knew there was something suspicious about that nose hair story. That was it. He believed the polar bears. He believed, the seal clubbing, all that. But the nose hairs, that was just one step too far for him to take. So those are Americans. This is a smart guy. This is a guy who was raised, in where it's cold, and still I love the fact that they're so egocentric. They just so think America first, that they don't know anything about their closest neighbors. And I thought I could play with that a lot.
I think you got a lot of very lovely mileage out of it.
Yes.
I just love that feeling of whenever I watch it, it's always that feeling Ray has constantly got a small Benny inside of him, kind of trying to push him towards the good side. And Benny's got a small Ray just trying to make him a little bit more streetwise. And it's just so perfectly balanced between the two of them. That
was the one thing, I love David Marciano, but the one thing he could never understand was that in television, and these guys, characters don't change. They glimpse their flaws, and they want to change, but they can't. Just like human beings don't. We just don't change. We pretend we evolve, we pretend we get smarter, but we make the same mistakes over and over again. And we had a lot of friction, he and I, even though I loved him, because he wanted his character to change, evolve, become smarter. I went, no, you don't. He doesn't change, you don't change. That's human beings. Every week you're going to make the same stupid mistake. But the thing is, you're going to be wiser. You're going to go, I'm not going to step on the banana peel this time. And you're going to step over it. You see it, step over it. And then you go, shit, I got to go back. And boom, you step on it. So you think you're smarter, you're not. And so he couldn't grasp that. And so ultimately, he was very unhappy because he wanted his character to get smarter and smarter. And I went, no, sorry. That's who you are. And then, Paul grasped it better than he did, because he understood that the character was very smart, but he was who he was. He grew up in a certain way. He was who he was, and even though he wanted to change and wanted to evolve, he wanted to become more the part. He said he could become a little bit smarter, a little bit, to cut a few corners. It always comes at a cost.
Yeah, it always felt like, I mean, I've always thought within TV and movies, the difference is within a movie, you're going on a journey. Within a TV show, you've got to do a reset, but it's almost like every series, you might just get one step like further on your journey, but that's about it.
Yeah, Seinfeld is the same character at the end of episode, the 10th season, or how many seasons they did as he did in the first. He's exactly the same, and all his friends are exactly the same. We think, and that's the fun of television. You get to keep writing those characters over and over and over again. And it's much more human than a movie. In a movie, you expect everyone to evolve and have their epiphany and have their crisis and come out the other side. And I love writing movies for that reason, because you see the emotional journey of the hero. It's just not true, though. Television is much truer.
And could you just tell us a bit about, like, I'm not surprised to hear that it was, because there's a few sort of things online which suggest that it was originally shot as just a 2-hour movie, which obviously it was a pilot always intended. But I'm not surprised to hear that because of the wonderful cast you've got in there. Can you just talk about a bit about casting it? And like Gordon Pinson is just amazing straight from the get-go. And
amazing.
Paul Grace.
I mean, Gordon came in. I'd been a huge fan of Gordon's forever and his work, and he's just such an iconic character and an iconic actor, and I needed someone to play that great father figure, but then I was killing him in the first scene, and I went, and so we shot in the Yukon, and we killed him, and he said, well, thanks for the work, Paul. I said, I'm bringing you back. He said, you just killed me. I said, yeah, but I'm going to figure a way to bring you back. He laughed at me and went off, and that was in the back of my head, and so I finally figured out a way to bring him back, and that was so much fun. I loved that. I loved that character haunting, trying to help his son, but unable to do so, and stuck in the past and with the hat cut off. You just have so much fun.
Yeah, and it was just it did seem like he had, I think, just a couple of scenes in that pilot, and part of it beyond the grave in a diary, not even on screen. And just his presence was so felt. It seems like he puts.
Well, and it was a father and son story. It was because this man was searching for the man who'd killed his father and the reason why, and that was going to haunt the entire series. So it was the emotional center of the film, and that's why this man's driven to go to this foreign place, to Chicago, which is so different from the Yukon and what he knows. And try to find his way through that jungle. And I thought, that has to be a very strong emotion. That bond he and his father has to be incredibly strong. So that's why it worked well, and why I knew I had to bring Gordon back.
And finding Paul Grace, like I've never seen anyone more born to play a role than he is in that.
Yeah, no, Paul was perfect for it. And it was a long search, and it was actually Robert Lantos who found him and sent me tape, and I saw him in some Canadian costume drama, and it was just ill-fitting costumes, and his face looked sort of like he put on weight or something. It wasn't. It was just badly lit. And I said, I didn't get it at all. He said, no, meet him. And so I did, and I met him, and that was it. I knew he had the right kind of dry humor, and so the heroic look, the dry humor, and that would fit very well. And he certainly did a great job.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of other shows where people say, oh, no one else could play it. And of course, some other actor would have if they hadn't been available, but it would have been different in some way. it would have been such a different show, I believe, without
Yes.
Paul
No,
Gross.
he had that innocence of that character, that purpose and that strength that that he could portray that really made that character Benton the character who he is today. He lives on.
We got a little bit of a request from the chat here from Karen Ellery. She wants to talk about you to talk about the casting of Franny, of course, the wonderful Ramona Milano.
Yeah, again, we found so many wonderful actors in Toronto, who were just not being used as well. They were, again, you know, I mean, there was nothing wrong with Canadian television at that time, but you know, when you have a smaller population, you have smaller budgets for your television shows, and you tend to do things that are safer or whatever, and people tend to be cast in. And you know, as they do anywhere, they give the same role over and over again. That happens in America. It happens in Britain. You know, I have many friends who say, can I just stop playing the wife?" And that was the case there. We just did auditions, brought her in, she knocked it out of the park, and I said, "Oh, great, we have to write more for her."
Yeah, because it seems like you're always very canny with who you cast, like in the smaller parts. Like I mean, say smaller parts, only smaller parts, not smaller actors or whatever the phrase is. But it always seems to be with a mind of how they can be used in the future, or is it just like you just really play that much?
No, it's not. It's not. But what happens is you write a good character, and then if you happen to cast a really good actor, you start thinking, ooh, what can I do with that character? Now, sometimes you just can't. I mean, we had wonderful characters in here. Mark Ruffalo. I mean, a lot of folks came in and did small roles that we were never able to use again. But boy, you wanted to, and if you found a way, like with Gordon, if you found a way to bring them back, you did, because it was so much fun writing for them the first time, even though you didn't know you were writing for them. That once they brought that character alive, you wanted it to stay alive.
It's a shame nothing ever happened with that Ruffalo fellow. I don't think we ever heard of him again, really.
No, sadly.
So getting back to like some of the casting as well. So like the original, one thing I'm very struck with as well by the pilot versus the kind of on-running show is I'm guessing the guy who played Walsh in the pilot wasn't available in the on-running series, but it was a very different casting choice going forward. That's
correct. So, there were just some folks who got busy and they weren't able to continue on. That happens between the pilot, because the pilot was shot and then they decide to air it as a movie because they weren't sure. They're going to test it. That was the theory. They'll test it by airing it basically 2 hours to see. And it got okay responses, and so they were okay. We'll do 13, and then but by then 2 years had passed, or a year and a half at least, and it was just hard to put everybody back together. Thank God, we had our core, but we had to expand from there.
But with the casting of Beau Starr, a fantastic performance, but very different from the original actor. Was it just a kind of case of you wanted to give that freedom for him to create his own character?
Things just happen. You find an actor and you just get going, ooh, I like him. I loved Beau, and his brother Mike. I loved so much, again, he brought something that just by his physicality and his skill, that brought so much to characters that you look for actors who don't have to do anything. They just look, and you know what they're thinking, and you go, okay, but they do it in a way that's just a little different than you expected. They surprise you, and so if they're angry, they whisper, or if they don't just like yell. I mean, they and which makes it much more human and fun. And oh my God, I just got locked out of my. Oh, then I'm back. And that was the case with Beau.
Okay, we've got another question from the floor. Unfortunately, I can only see Facebook user during the using the streaming app I'm using, but it's saying that the user was asked, did it take long to play the duo who played detectives Huey and Louie?
Again, we just lucked out, and I loved Huey and Louie. I loved them so much. Such terrific actors. It was we really lucked out with our Canadian actors. We just we had a good casting director. We went in, we cast, and went, oh, you're the guy. And no, it didn't take long. They cast almost immediately, and they were wonderful. That was a case where I went, oh, these guys are coming back. Oh, I love these guys, and we just kept bringing them back and bringing them back.
Fantastic. And so, right, so you did the pilot, and then quite a while later, you go back to do the main show.
Year and a half, yeah.
Yeah. Did any of the kind of like ideas change in that time? What was your kind of like? Did you have a kind of a vision for the first series?
I didn't have much of an idea past what was in the pilot. I didn't know where it was going to go. I don't usually. I like to surprise myself. What we weren't prepared for was the. I mean, it was very hard to find Canadian writers. The good ones were busy, and the others there wasn't. Since there wasn't a big demand for them, they didn't develop the skills, and so we had a very hard time. And actually, what happened was my dad got a call from some guy he knew from his squash club. The one thing my father did, he was like he was a poor kid, grew up middle class, and when he got into middle class, he bought some nice house, and where he kept his construction equipment in the yard, and he wanted to take up a sport, and he'd seen this thing called squash, and so he decided to play squash. He joined this club, the only one who would let him in, and so one of but he was all the other guys who played squash had gone to university, etc. And this is the guy who didn't fit in, so he was a little ostracized a little bit there, but one of the folks who was a member, who was one of the more educated and sort of well-heeled type, was one of the attorneys, and he knew my dad was a member, so he called him up and said, "Listen, my son's an attorney, but he doesn't want to do it. He wants to be a writer, and he's written one thing, but would your son look at it?" Sure. So I saw his episode of, I don't know, some bad cable show. Let's send him down. And so I did, and I liked him. So I hired him immediately. I said, "Here's what you're going to do. You're going to write, but what I'm going to do is that I'm going to rewrite you, and I'm going to make you sit and watch me rewrite you. And all you do is sit and watch, and you'll learn. And you'll learn why, etc. Because I can't teach, but I can show you how I do and how I think by the way my fingers move and the way the characters talk." He said, "Great." So we did, and after the 5 or 6 episodes, he got quite good, and we ended up writing Victoria's Secret together. That way, we put it together because it read very quickly, and that became David Shore, who is now much more successful than I'll ever be. And so much richer than he does complain that he's still the second most famous writer from London, Ontario, but still, he created House. He's got his show, The Good Doctor. So amazing writer, and so he came up with me through that and through my next 3 series. So you found ways to encourage the writers. But the other thing was that I had my sister Kathy, who hadn't written much at all. In fact, she'd never sold anything, but she was Canadian. And she'd been working with me on stories, and I was sort of teaching her and letting her feel her way in. And Kathy had quite the ego. She thought she could do anything, and it was good to have that kind of confidence. But so I hired her as producer, and she came on, and Jeff King, who I discovered, who actually I didn't get along well with the producer of the pilot, and so. Because I thought they were just too Canadian. They were trying to do things in such too cheap and way. And I said, no, we're doing something. It has to be on American network television. We're going to do it right. And if it takes 4 takes to get it rather than the 1 take you allow people here, we're going to do the 4 takes as comedy. And if we do 10 takes, we're going to do 10 takes because it has to be right. Comedy is tough. And they were like, no. I said, yeah, trust me. It's that or get off my set. Because it's the only place you don't want to be that's uncomfortable is between me and the art I'm trying to create. If you try to stop me, if you're with me and you're helping and we're making mistakes together, etc., we're great. But if you're trying to stop me, it's not a comfortable place for you. So I had some of those people on the pilot until they figured out, okay, we better go along for the ride. This guy's either got the vision and capability to do it, or he doesn't. And so. No sense trying to stop him at every stage. So I found Jeff King to come on as a producer, and it turned out to be one of my lifelong friends. Jeff's wonderful producer and director and writer. But at that point, he was just producing and sort of toying with stories of that. So, about 6 episodes into this, we got our pickup for the rest of the year, and I was quickly overwhelmed. And I couldn't, because I was writing, I was directing, I was supervising the set. Even when I wasn't directing, I was on the set telling the directors, because they didn't quite understand the balance of the comedy. It's really hard. And so I would sit in my trailer and I'd write the next scenes, for the next week, and I was editing it and I was doing the music, and it was too much on an ongoing basis. So I turned to Kathy and Jeff and said, "You have every second episode. It's yours. I don't even want to read the scripts. Good luck." And so from about episode 12 on, they just did every second one, and I was surprised. Oh, that's what we're doing this week. Literally that. And I just had to give up control completely and just focus on getting through the year. And so that's why you'll find the shape in the series where things seem to be, oh, we're doing this week, and that week it's a little different. But I learned from Marshall Herskovitz and Ed Zwick when I did 30-something, who gave me a lot of freedom and give the writers a lot of freedom. That's what, you need to give people freedom in order to create. And so I gave them that freedom, and I think it worked out quite well. Their style was different than mine. Mine was a little darker, perhaps at times. I like to go from really dark to really absurd, as with Manhunt and episodes like that, which are just, really dark and then ridiculously over the top. And I'd like to be able to stretch and give you that, because my love of Monty Python and Fawlty Towers and the Marty Feldman Show and all these things I was raised on, I thought you could, if you can believe the character, if the character believes the stakes and cares that much, you can just stretch them to the sky. So that's what I was doing. Their stories tend to be a little different, but I really love them, and that's how we survived the first season.
And do you think there was something to setting the scene by doing 13 episodes where you were so hands-on and then giving it out to the other creators?
I had to. I had to. I mean, you're supposed to be that hands-on, and I was very hands-on every second episode after that. Yeah. But with me, it was just how to survive, and I thought it did quite well. It was a nice balance. I think Jeff and Kathy did a terrific job.
I just think there was a certain tone set that then, even though you can see the differences in the style in the other episodes, it was all in keeping as you set what it was.
Yeah, and they were very close to me the whole time I was creating the show. Kathy was with me when I was writing the show down in California when I was writing the pilot, and she was sort of working as my assistant, kind of, and was always trying to help her break into television, and so. I'd let her throw in ideas and things, and so she started to learn sort of my habits and my ways, and became a terrific writer on her own, in her own way.
Excellent. And one thing which I'm always very struck by, especially I've got to know the guys behind the RWC 139 conventions, and something they've done the set tours, and something really struck by is how much you get out of each location on Due South. But it feels like it never feels like you're in the same area.
Yeah, you have to learn it. When you have a small budget, because we had a relatively small, there's a big budget for Canada, but for the States, it was a relatively small budget. It was one of the reasons CBS wanted to do the show, because they could get a cheap show, and so we had to stretch those dollars. So if you were shooting in this direction, you better make sure that you might be able to turn around, light it differently, and give you something that looks completely different, as if it's a mile away or something. And so we often did that. We'd stand on a street corner, Jeff and I, and go, okay, this way we can shoot this. We turn this way, it's a different city. It's Chicago here, it's Toronto there, or whatever, or it's or it is whatever we can do, or it's this side of the town and that side. We often, or we'd go to the front shop, and then we'd search for what can we shoot within one block, and because when you move a company, it takes an hour, 2 hours, and we don't have that. We need to shoot, and so we walk around the back, Jeff and I, and go, oh, see. I can rewrite that scene for this fire escape, and we can pretend it's someplace else, and this is where the burglar is going. So yeah, you had to. It was just a matter of, you had to be inventive in order to get the movie or the TV series shot on that schedule.
Was there one episode for you where it really felt like you was that kind of aha moment of like, we've got it here, we've got like
yeah, Victoria's Secret. I think when we finally came up with Victoria's Secret, which is the end of the thing, that's when. And that one, you know, David and I wrote the whole 2-hour two-part one in 1 week. And while I was prepping it, while I was casting it, because they came up with the idea they wanted a big show to end the thing on, and they'd taken away one episode from us, and so I said, okay, we'll do a two-parter. We'll do a big cliffhanging two-parter, sort of an origin story, and why is, you know, answer some questions about Benton and, you know, why he's the way with women, and have this terrifically romantic thing. And they said, how? I said, I don't know. I'm gonna start writing now. So I grabbed David. We came into the room, and we just started banging away. And while I was prepping, while we were casting, we, you know, coming up characters, going, ooh, call a casting director, see if we can find a character. And so it was so much fun. And of course, we found Victoria, who I knew, and that it turned out to be pretty epic, and I loved directing that. That was so much fun. But you know, there were others along the way. I loved the one. You see, I haven't seen any of these since they aired. I haven't seen one. Right. I don't go back and look at my work, but I remember them fondly. I remember shooting them especially fondly. I remember the one. I forget the one that was with the Canadian Mafia, which are going down to the three and they're apologizing to each other on the way. I loved that one. And the shootout that they're all waiting. And then I loved, because I think I directed that one too, and if not, I stood behind the director. I can't recall. But no, I didn't direct that one. I only directed the beginning and the end. I forget. But I loved doing it. But also in the second season, I came back and did the one with, you know, when Dad is back in his life and shows up in the middle of a shootout to give him advice. And that was so much fun. I forgot what it was called. But then others I loved, the Christmas one we did, the gift of the wheelman. Yeah. I thought that was fun. It was good because it had deeper themes, and it was a simple story, but something we got to twist around. And yeah, so there were a few that I really loved. I have to go back and watch them sometime.
I mean, you talked there about Victoria's Secret a little bit, but it's the way it's filmed, the way every moment is shot, of like an entrance with the snow globe, and then at the end that very cinematic shot of her on the train. And I think it almost could be like wrongly shot. That scene could go on too long, but it's perfectly just builds up the tension just so well. I think it's one of the.
I just went crazy. Thank you. I just went crazy. I said I'm going to do exactly what I want to do. Because I hadn't been allowed to direct anything in television up to that point, and these people said I couldn't direct, and I said I think I can. And so I just set out. I didn't set out to show people I could direct, but I set out to tell the story the best, most visual way I could. And so that was one of the first things I did, and I really loved doing it. It was just you find a style, and that with me it's very organic. For example, when they're coming to search the house, I forget which one it was, I decided to shoot the whole scene from outside through the windows and move the cameras that way, because I thought that was much more interesting. You know, the train station, the confessional. I mean, with the confessional, I remember people said, no, you can't just do 4 pages of dialogue, monologue, sitting there. You have to shoot flashbacks and things. I said, no, now if you have a good actor, you stay in his face and he'll keep you. This Paul, trust me, is a good actor, and he can keep us on the edge of our seats, you know, for those 4 pages or whatever, because it's a story, and lean forward story is all you need. And so I just trusted him. You know, I shot it in a certain way that made it feel very intimate and dramatic. But you know, we're in a tiny booth. It was like, yes, I was able to pull it back and bring a camera in, and do something visually interesting. But it's the actor. You know, it's the words and the actor, and if you can. So I trusted that. Well, other people would have said, no, you have to do flashbacks. I said, no, I don't. I can tell you the whole story right here.
Yeah, that seemed like one of the bravest shots I've ever seen of him, just sitting there in that confessional booth, and the camera just doesn't move from him. And just,
yeah,
I think you're almost nervous for the performance, like when you're watching it back.
Yeah.
It's so magical. yeah, that's just me really just blowing you up there. But to get back to the questions, so with the second series, you're only involved really at the beginning of that series. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'd gone off to create another series in the south, down here at Easy Streets, but I wanted to support Kathy and Jeff, because it was originally canceled and it was brought back, and so I wanted to support them. So I said I'll help them write, I'll help them come up with their stories. So I helped them break their stories for the second season. I sat down with them and said, try this, try that, try this. And then came up as I'll write and direct a couple, and I did that, and I enjoyed doing that very much. I think it was I've done one or two, I can't remember. And that was it. I allowed them to go, and that's what you have to do. You have to let people go and do what they do. Same with the third season. Third season, Paul wanted to make some changes, and he came to me and he said, "Do you think I could run the show?" And I said, "I think you absolutely could." And so I gave him my best advice on how to move forward. He made his own choices, but I thought, again, and a completely different style, because every time you have a new showrunner, you're gonna have a different style. But again, I thought very good.
Yeah, and I mean, like, I want to get on some of your other work after this, but given that it has been almost 30 years, and there's still people going to the convention I aforementioned in Canada, and I want to give a big shout out to Stefan and John Wright, both of whom say hi, by the way.
Great, thank you.
And what do you think owes to the longevity of Due South, and why we still love it? I mean, I could tell you from my experience, but for you,
I have no idea. I never know why something is going to be successful or why it's going to live. I don't know. I'd create my characters. I try to cast them well. I let them go. I don't know. Some things, I mean, with Crash, $1 Million Baby, I was told, hold on, I've got a cup here. Stay where you are.
Thank you everyone for your questions, by the way, while we're waiting for Paul to come back. And we will try and bring in your questions as much as we can, some of which I've sort of left because I know we're getting stuff, but thank you all for...
This is, you probably can't read this, it's backward. No, you can. When I was writing Crash, $1 Million Baby, I'd taken a big risk. I'd left television. I couldn't stand it anymore. I was just being poked into more and more traditional ways, and I'm not a traditional kind of writer. And I came to them after Due South and Easy Streets, and I wanted to do something very daring, and they wanted me to do a law show, and I went, okay, fine, family to feed, do a law show. And it was fine, did my very best. Really, really tried, but again, it was frustrating being put into such a tight box. And so I quit, actually I was fired, and I wrote $1 Million Baby. Took a year to write that, and then I took it to, I wasn't a film guy, I'd never done any movies. And in those days especially, there was film and there was television, and it was two different worlds. You didn't socialize, you didn't know any of those movie stars. They were up there, as were the writers and the directors who did that were up there, and we lowly folks were down here doing television. And so when I'd written this, and I took it to one of my film producer friends, big film producer friends, to read, the only guy I knew. And he said, he read it, and he called me to his house, and he said this, he said, "Really good script, Paul. It will never sell." And so someone made this mug for me recently, last year. I told that story, someone made the mug. And so I was disappointed, obviously, but then I went away and got with my friend Bobby Moresco, and my wife at that time, as I was married, and she said, that idea you had for a TV show, you should pull that out and do that as a movie. It'll win an Oscar. I went, what are you talking about? Fine. Okay. So I pulled out this outline I had and tried to sell, and no one wanted it. Again, it was daring. As a television show, I tried it everywhere. I'd taken it at HBO. I'd taken it everywhere. No one wanted this thing, because it was about race. It was about class in America. And so I called Bobby and said, "Do you want to write this with me? I've got a 40-page outline, a 35-page outline." He said, "Sure." So we wrote it, and wrote quickly, did a rewrite, took it back to the same producer, and he said, "Really good script, Paul. It'll never sell." He did the same thing twice in a row. And so I was disappointed, But, he's the expert. So I just kept trotting it around all over town for 3-4 years, just tried to sell those scripts, and finally got a little money. And they sold, and they did very well commercially. Well, they're not commercial ideas in the least. So I don't know, to answer your question, why things work and why they don't. I know it's a good story. I know it's well cast. I know it's well shot. But whether it'll grab on to the imagination of people and it'll stay there, I mean, like Due South has, I can see why Canadians would love it. But I had no idea why Brits or Australians or I don't know, people in India or Japan, I don't know why people there like this series so much. So you tell me.
Well, I will just say this. I think there is something wonderful in there's so many specific things in the show, but you can take general lessons from them. And there's also, I mean, like we were saying before about the thing of you can only take the piss out of somewhere if you know it so well and you love it so well. That very much speaks to the British sense of humor. I think that you were mentioning that you were influenced by. And I think there's something wonderful about the fact that I think if you'd made Due South somehow for half the budget or twice the budget you made it for, I think it would be the same show, because the heart of it had to be there.
Well, thank you. It was in the characters. I was lucky enough to be able to create those characters that we then were lucky enough to cast in ways that were so, as you said, so perfect that it lasted.
Yeah, you've mentioned Million Dollar Baby there. Actually, I'll get onto that in a minute. One of I just want to quickly touch upon was Walker, Texas Ranger. What a fantastic and very different show. And to have Chuck Norris, had he done much before that? Was that really the discovery of him?
Oh, Chuck had done all these action movies, and he was a huge action star. Yeah. And again, this was Jeff Sagansky came to me, and I was about to go off to shoot a little movie in Latvia, which turned into a disaster. It was my first attempt at trying to make movies. And he said, Paul, I have Chuck Norris, and I have a very bad script about Texas Rangers. And I said, and you're calling me because? He said, I need a favor. Just give me a couple weeks. I know you're taking out. Give me a couple weeks. And I said, well, okay. He said, oh, I have no money. I went, oh, okay, because I had a pretty good pilot fee at that time. And, okay, I like Jeff, fine. So he paid me like $10,000 for the whole job, when my fee was a lot bigger. And so I went off and I created this pilot for them. I gave it to them and I left. I never saw them again. I'd met Chuck once. That was it. That's all I ever had to do with that show, which proved, and it was on for 10 years, which proves to me that the less I have to do with a television show, the more successful it is. And so that's another thing I learned.
I don't know. You created a show in Due South, which was practically unkillable. It went for 3 series, got cancelled twice, and we're still talking about it 30 years later. That's not bad.
Yeah. I wish it had been unkillable. I wish it had survived. I wish it had, braver executives and folks who weren't so reliant on that meter that week, the Nielsen or whatever it was, that was tough, because it could have grown into something.
It could have, but I think if something is so determined for people to kill it and it still makes it to 3 series, I think that's not a bad shout.
Yeah, that's not bad. That's exactly.
We were talking a bit about Million Dollar Baby there. So when does Clint Eastwood get involved in that?
Clint, 4 years into me trying to sell it, I was going to direct it. I had a little money to do it. And then my producing partner, I'd put the money up for the rights, and he'd put the money up for the rights. And he's a real salesman, a real Hollywood type. And he was pals with Clint. He said, should we take it to Clint for the role of Frankie? And I said, he's going to want to direct. No. So he took it to him, and I was shooting. I was in my first weekend of shooting Crash at that time. And of course, and I don't think he even told him there was a director. I honestly don't. I just think he's too good of a salesman, this guy. And so Clint called him back and said, love the script, can I direct it? To which point I told him, no, let Clint find his own script. Thank you so much. And my agents descended on me and said, Paul, stop. If Clint Eastwood directs your script, it'll make your career. And then I thought of Unforgiven, which is one of my favorite films of all time. And he did he's a masterful job of directing that and starring that. I went, yeah, he should direct this thing. So it turned into a great relationship. I ended up doing 3 movies with him. one becoming friends. I had Hollywood friends and friends who really love each other when they see each other, but when they don't. Especially when I took my choice to move to New York and live here, I did that for a reason. I wanted to get away from all this Hollywood phoniness that's there. It's not all phoniness, but it is superficial. It is driven by career and driven. Everybody has an agenda, and I like to be around human beings who have their own agendas that are not necessarily, they need me for something or other, or I need Clint for something or other. It just seemed I want friendships for other reasons. Yeah. I also wanted a city. I missed doing Toronto as a city, and a lot of the cities in Canada are cities, and as in Europe, and LA is just not a city. It's endless suburbs. But in any case, he got involved, and I thought did a wonderful job. I produced that film, but I couldn't stay on the set long because Hillary started asking me questions instead of asking the director, and I thought that would be a great disservice to the director and to her to be in between the two of them. So I sort of absented myself, and at that point, I had another script to write for Clint anyways. I had Flags of Our Fathers, and in the middle of writing that, he asked me to do Letters in Iwo Jima, so I was pretty busy. So, but that turned out to be a great relationship. I'm like, I'll write for Clint anytime, because he won't change a word in my scripts. Martin Campbell, don't change a word in my scripts. And so Casino Royale is the way it is because Martin wouldn't change a word, and $1 Million Baby wouldn't change. So as a writer, you love that.
And I think anyone who grew up watching Clint would be too scared to say no matter what age he is.
I know. It's amazing.
And just talk us through just going to the Oscars, just getting to that moment. And where do you first hear that you've got the nod? And how does
that was ridiculous. It was fabulous, but ridiculous. I mean, we'd been nominated for $1 Million Baby the year before, so I was kind of prepared in some ways. I knew what the circus was. Award shows, I always hated award shows. I'd never watched them. I thought the competition between artists is kind of obscene. I love Oscars. I fucking love them. I mean, I love the whole idea, but trying to judge one great picture against another, because you look back at all the wonderful movies that didn't win or weren't even nominated in history. So I'm not a big fan of the salesmanship that goes towards award shows. At the same time, it's very heady. It's lovely. People are telling you you're brilliant. They're handing you statuettes for various other award shows along the way. So, it was a wonderful experience. I really, really like having those Oscars and those Emmys and those Golden Globes and the David Donatello Awards. Well, all the awards I've won over the years. I don't know, but there's a lot, and I really, really am greatly appreciative of all of them. But you don't make a movie to win an award. Right. You make a movie to say something, it's like little comic scripts. You make them to tell a story. And if you tell it well, people might give you an award, and they might not. I mean, In the Valley of Ella, which is my second film, I thought was actually a better film than Crash in many ways. Certainly significant. So I was trying to stop a war at the time, and it was great performances. No one saw it because it was a political movie. It was critical of the Iraq War when the Iraq War was very popular in America back then, and the studio was scared to put it out, so it went out very small. Doesn't make any worse movie.
But I'm just wondering, with you, I get the feeling you're someone who might not like. How do I put this? The level of attention, but the way of the attention after winning 2 Oscars. Like, was it hard to kind of like concentrate to what you wanted to actually make?
It wasn't hard for me to concentrate because I just naturally turn down all the big offers I get because I'm an idiot. They bring me all these big movies to do, and I just go, no, why would you think of me? No, stop, go away. I want to do this little movie with the thing. I'm an independent filmmaker. But at the same time, I mean, I know some terrific writers who are complete hermits. I know directors who are complete hermits. You get Oscar nominations, you get Oscars, it's really hard for it not to affect you and not to puff your ego up. You start thinking you're damn good, and you are damn good. But the problem is, I've seen it happen so many times where it goes from there to people thinking they're infallible. And then they make really bad movies because they won't listen. And I knew I was pretty damn good at that point. I'd spent many years working really hard at my craft. And so I knew my craft was pretty good. It wasn't great. I had a lot to learn, but if I give enough time, I could sculpt a pretty good story and maybe direct it. Simply. And emotionally, but simply. But I wasn't a fabulist. I wasn't the Martin Scorsese who could do this with the cameras and this and think this way. I just could tell a story emotionally perhaps, but that's what I could do. However, in staying in Hollywood at that time, it's like everybody tells you, every coffee shop you walk into, every place tells you you're brilliant, tells you, kisses your ass, and many of them mean it. It's not insincere. Some of them insincere, but that's terrible for an artist because you start believing what they're saying.
Yeah,
you can't help not to. It's you're just your ego. You change, and I saw myself changing, and believing this stuff, and I said I have to get the hell out. So I moved to New York right after that, and just because, I'd always loved New York. I'd worked here in theater when I was like 18 years old, and I loved the mystique of that. But I needed to get around people that just weren't all in the same business, who could have conversations, so that I'd have different conversations. Given my druthers, I'd live in Europe, because I love that way of life. I love sitting. You give me an outdoor cafe and a laptop and a good cappuccino or a glass of wine, I'm a happy guy. So it's not that I'm not social. I'm a contradiction, like my characters. I'm a social hermit. Just like I don't know if I'm an optimistic cynic or a cynical optimist. I think I'm a cynical optimist. I mean, I have to. I mean, now with what's going on, which is so terrible, and is affecting so many people's lives, and killing people. I know friends who have been terribly, deeply affected by this and were ill, and it's a terrible time. And I feel guilty in many ways because I love it. I don't have to come up with make excuses as to why I can't go out to lunch or dinner. I could just stay home. I can just write. And I've been teaching myself how to cook, which I never knew because I just ate out 3 meals a day at some cheap diner or someplace because I just sort of go out, eat, come back, write. And now I don't need to make up excuses as to why I don't have to see people. I'm such a horrible man. So now and it's, but I like seeing people. Well, I know I play my games when I actually go out, but I have to force myself to go out. And when I do, I really enjoy it. With my charity and that, I can go out, I can work a room, I can get people's money, I can be the showman. And when I'm a director, I can do that. But it's like that's the thing of being a writer and a director. They're completely different human beings.
Yeah.
With completely different skill sets, and many people can't do both because one has to be thoughtful and one has to be able to sit for long hours by themselves and live like that, and the other has to be able to manage people well, to be a great leader. And I can't say I'm all those things. I can't. I've failed many times in both writing and in directing and certainly producing. But I have skills that sort of fall into both, and I force myself more to go out and direct than I have to force myself to write. I've always felt that I can sit down and live with my characters, and which makes me a terrible person to live with. Ask both of my ex-wives and my kids, as I'm so selfish. When I start writing, I'm in that world with my characters. I am in there, and I don't want to get out. And people will be important things will be going on with your lives, and they're going, yeah. These guys have to do this and this, and then, oh, Dad, this is going on. Oh, yeah. I really, and I'm sincerely interested, but I've got this character who's in this problem, who's got this thing, and I'm in that world. And only when I'm out of that world do I go, oh, that was important. I better go check in on my daughter and see what it is. And by then, of course, I've missed it. It's a horrible man.
I did something I loved in everything you said there is I think there's something when you reach those success points, like the Oscars or whatever it is, where someone who's just like who does get enticed by the awards and everything, and just like thinks, how can I win another one? I think some of my favorite creators and auteurs, if I can use a slightly pompous term like that, like yourself, like Kevin Smith, like several other kind of creators, just think, how can I create another story which I'm going to love as much as that?
Yeah, yeah. It's not that we don't want the Oscars. I want a truckload of them. I want a whole room full like Steven Spielberg. I'd love that. But I'd much rather do 10 great movies than have 10 Oscars. Give me the chance to make 10 great movies. That's all I want.
Yeah, definitely.
Or a couple of good TV series along the way.
Yeah, that would be good. I think you ticked all those boxes along the way.
Yeah, we're never happy.
Yeah, well, one thing I have to, of course, get upon as a British man, it would be a crime if I didn't talk Bond with you. Now, like in this country, you like you're born just knowing what a Dalek is and who James Bond is. That's the two things you've got set in your head. You must have, like, I don't know, how do you get over?
Well, I mean, when they came to me, it was after Crash and after $1 Million Baby, and I was vacationing with my family. I'd finally taken a vacation with my family in Italy, because I'm just terrible. I don't take vacations. So my wife had convinced me to take a house in Italy for a month, and we were inviting all our friends, and the whole family were there. And I said I could write there, I could go there, I could write, but I had to be there. So I'd met Martin Campbell for dinner. He invited me to dinner the month before. We had a lovely dinner. And then while I was in Italy, my agents called and said, Paul, they want to talk to you about writing the next Bond movie. And I said, are they out of their mind? And I said, why? I said, have they seen my movies? Crash, $1 Million Baby. They've seen these movies. And they said, Paul, I think they knew who they're calling. I said, are they aware that if I do Bond, I'll ruin it for everyone forever? And they said, Paul, they know who they're calling. Just get on the phone. Fine. So they were nice enough to come to Italy to meet me, because I wouldn't leave. And so they not only came to Rome, they came to this small town of Bolsena, and the whole, the Broccoli's and Martin, they came and discussed it. I'd read their script, which I thought had many problems. And I told them how I would fix it. And I did. It was so much fun. I wrote the whole script backwards. I started at the end, because I knew that they needed an ending they didn't have. And I started with that, and then wrote the whole thing backwards. Act 3, Act 2, Act 1, gave it to them, and then they got Daniel Craig, which I thought was a brilliant move, and that was it.
There's just something about those films, especially the first one particularly, which it strips away all the iconography, but there's something in the way you've written the scenes which kind of puts it there without saying it. Yeah,
I mean, I just had to say that if I'm going to do Bond, I have to make Bond human. I can't change who Bond is, but I have to ask myself really hard questions about how Bond became that. And I had to come up with those answers. And that's how a lot of those story points, the scene on the train, and all those things came out. They seen in the, I knew I had to make him fall in love. I knew I had to get under his armor. I knew he had to be surprised by this person. I knew what was at stake for him, and how he became this killer. And I had so much fun because if you're given complete freedom like they gave me, they were worried, but they gave me complete freedom to recreate because they wanted to recreate Bond. They were scared, but they wanted to do it. And they came to a guy who just isn't scared about stuff like that. And so I really loved it. And Martin, as I said, wouldn't change a word in my script, defended it all the way. They asked me to do the next one after that. I didn't want to, because I thought I couldn't do a better job than Casino Royale. They convinced me, I did. But then they had a director who thought he was a writer. And after I gave them the script, they redid it. And so I think I gave them a better script than Casino Royale, actually, but that's not the way the movie turned out. But they still made billions of dollars, so I can't complain. Now, I'm afraid I have a writing section to go into in just a few minutes, so I'm going to have to bail on you shortly.
Have I got enough time for one more question?
Of course you do, yeah.
Okay,
that was the warning. That was the warning.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. So just, I wanted to very quickly, I don't really want to get into the Scientology of it all because those
Sure.
people get too much press anyway.
You can watch watched Going Clear like my friend did last night. That explains a lot.
But the only thing I do want to ask about is that I think it took a lot of bravery to talk about those experiences. Like the first people to talk about it, it took a certain level of bravery, but seeing what shrapnel they got from that, what makes you still determined to tell your truth, to tell that story, even though knowing you're going to get some reprisal from that community?
These are people that I aligned with myself with since I was 22 years old in Canada. I got in Canada, in London, Ontario, when I was 22. I was in love. They said they could help me get along better with my girlfriend. That's how I got in, and it worked. I get along much with my girlfriend. We got married, etc. Moved to Hollywood. Never helped with my career, although they keep saying that it will, and I certainly hoped it will, but it wouldn't. It didn't. But it did help, with my relationship and other things. And and so as I went on, it helped a little less and helped a little less, and got a little stranger. And I didn't like some of it, but I always thought, it's not harming anybody else. It means at a certain point in my early 30s, I said, well, this isn't for me. You see it in the Going Clear movie. I get to a point where I go, no, this doesn't make any sense to me. But at the same time, it's not harming anybody. My wife is happy in it. My kids seem happy with it. I can just, I can just be the guy who picks and chooses and goes along and uses what works for me and not what works for others. But I've always had a thing for defending underdogs, and they sell it very well as an underdog situation that's being attacked, that's being suppressed around the world, that people just don't understand. There's bigots, etc., that are trying to destroy it. And I am big on defending people who I think are being picked on by bullies. And then at some point I realized that was a complete lie. And it took me a long time, over 30 years, to figure that out. And once I did, I figured I can't leave quietly. Everyone else, all the other movie stars, other people who've been in and out, left quietly. Frankly, they were just too scared to do it, because this is an organization that's incredibly vicious, and they come after you. And once they do start coming after you, they never stop. It's written right in what Hubbard said: once you have an enemy, you do not stop attacking that enemy until that enemy is totally, completely, and utterly destroyed. You don't leave them wounded. So I knew they'd come after me forever. And I know people think that that's hyperbole. They think and it's not. They will come after you forever until you're completely and utterly ruined. And they'll find new ways to do it, and they've done it with others so many times. I know this because we've seen it, and people can't actually believe it. But the story of, Paulette Cooper, who was a writer who they completely destroyed and set up, and had her indicted on bomb threats, and had her at the point of being thrown in jail, thrown in prison, and committing suicide. They're able to do that. They're able to do so much, and have been proven to do so much. They private detectives and their attorneys, and they hide behind them. And so I knew going into this, they'd come after me. I knew they'd find a way to create a scandal that looked nothing like what it was, and they'd come after me. Well, they have, and people will believe what they want to believe about me. Never really cared. I mean, I do care. I want people to love me, but if they don't, I'm fine. And if they take away all my money, they take away money. I was born without money. I was born in the working class. I don't need all this lovely stuff. And as I spend it on attorneys and lose it, it's fine. I'm fine. There are big problems in this world. You go to Haiti, there's 8 people live in a shack with a mud floor and have to sleep standing up when it rains. Those are problems. And so I knew they'd come after me. I knew they still will. I know they're going to come after. Leah came out 3 years after me because I supported her in coming out. Mike did, Mike Rinder, who I didn't really know in the church, but I've become friendly with. And they're really suffering. I mean, they've been set up in many ways, especially Mike. Suffering much more than I am. So you just can't not speak the truth just because people are going to come after you. you just, once you make a decision, you've got to live with it, and that's it. And that's what I'm doing. And very happy to have made the decision. I wouldn't make the decision in any other way. And even though I'm incredibly stupid to have done it, all I had to do was walk away quietly like everyone else, and nothing would have occurred. And that's what they told me. They ganged up on me. 10 people came to my office and said, just walk away quietly, rip up your letter of resignation, walk away quietly, and everything will be fine. And I said, it's not me. It's all right, it's not me. So I knew they were going to do it. They did it. They'll find new ways of doing it. I'll survive. And there, as I said, there are people much worse situation than I am. All over the world, every day. Walk out on this street, you're going to find homeless people. You're going to find people in trouble. You're going to find, especially right now with what's going on. People are desperate. People are suicidal with this. I mean, this is terrible. And this is, and during this pandemic, it just really shows the difference between the rich and the poor. I mean, Canada, I love Canada for the way it's treating this. I mean, they're protecting their people. They're doing their best. I mean, yeah, they're making mistakes, but my God, that's what it is to have a government. America, we're so proud to be Americans, even when it's foolish, even when it's, you know, we're not socialists, and we're not communists, and therefore we're not protected, and we don't have health care, and we don't have protections, and no one gets any money, and we get kicked out in the streets. And yes, we're American. We're idiots. We're idiots. So, and I include myself among them. I'm an American and a Canadian. I became an American, and so I'm just as much an idiot as the rest. We put up with this nonsense. Terrible, terrible things are happening in this country every day to good people. So whatever they do to me, couldn't care. You know, much worse things are happening elsewhere.
Paul, I've got to say, for every time you've called yourself stupid or an idiot or whatever phrase you might use in this interview, please never stop being stupid and an idiot, because like the ways you've spoken out, the projects you've made because of your apparent idiocy in your own eyes, I disagree, mine, but like, please never stop being an idiot if this is what you.
I wish I had a choice and could, but I can't. So thank you so much.
We're glad you know.
I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, and be well up there, and be safe with everyone there. Thank you for doing it. Thank you for loving Due South for 30 years. Thank you for keeping it alive. And I will come to one of your conventions one of these times. I promise. I just get nervous. So
before you go, I do have to say all the wonderful comments we've had about how much you've inspired the people listening. And so I'm just passing this on on behalf of all the lovely comments we've had.
Thank you. I had great contributors. I had great collaborators in this thing, and that's how it worked. So thank you so much.
Just on the way out the door, could you just say, this is Paul Haggis, and you're listening to Due South by Southeast.
This is Paul Haggis, and you're listening to Due South by Southeast.
Thank you so much. Take care. And love to your assistant, Guy, for setting this up.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Thank you. Goodbye.
How do I get off this thing? I can't. I'm with you.